we're going to talk about setting up React Router. Let's talk about the philosophy behind React Router, specifically behind React Router version 4, which we're going to be using in Lambda. So the old way, version 3 of React Router, versions 1, 2, and 3, all the other routers that we have in other front-end technologies, they are static routing. Static routing doesn't really follow React principles. In other words, routing wasn't following React's mental model for building the UI. And the authors of React Router noticed this and wanted to change React Router to follow React's mental model. What does that mean? Well, they rewrote React Router, and they introduced version 4, which introduces dynamic routing, or routing that takes place as your app is being rendered and not in some configuration outside of the normal render process. This is awesome because it also gives us a declarative way to compose our UI with routes just as we compose it with components. We'll see this more in later videos. Today we're just going to talk about getting started with React Router. So to get started, open up your terminal and go to the application that you want to add React Router to, and we're going to use the command yarn add React Router DOM, as you can see here. Then you should see yarn do its thing and add this library as a dependency. Next, we're going to set up routing in our application. So in your app, this is going to be probably in your index.js file. You're going to import browser router as router from React Router DOM. And then you'll wrap your app component with router inside the React DOM.render function call. Now we're going to set up routing in our application. So in your index.js file, you're going to import browser router as router, as we can see here, and wrap your app with it. So import the router with the syntax that's shown here from React Router DOM, and this imports the browser router component, but renames it to router inside our file. And I'll show you why we do that in the next video. But for now, import browser router as router from React Router DOM. Then inside the render call, we're going to wrap our app component with this new router component. Here's a look at what your index.js file should probably look like. Now we're going to create an application, and please follow along as I do this. We're going to create an Avengers app, and we're going to take these steps to implement and to add React Router in our application. All right, I'm going to start in my terminal, and using Create React App 2.0, I'm going to create a new project called Avengers. Once this is created, we're going to install React Router DOM library. Don't forget to cd into your app. All right, perfect. Now we're going to open up our application inside our code editor. There we go. And here's our application. So at this point, you should have your Avengers app up, and we'll just delete a couple of these files that we don't need. Then we're going to go into our app. We're going to delete everything inside here. And inside our index.js, we're going to delete this stuff here and this line here. Okay, perfect. So now, as we saw before, we're going to import browser router as router from React Router DOM. Then we're going to wrap our app component inside this render call with this new router component. And there we go. So now we have the ability to use React Router inside our application. So let's take a second we're going to run this project. And we're going to look at exactly what doing this gives us inside the browser. So we're going to look under the hood and look at this router component. Oh, looks like we forgot to delete this in one more spot in our app.js. There we go. Okay, perfect. So let's take a look at the React tools. And you can see already that our app is wrapped with these components here. So when we wrap inside index.js, when we wrap this here with router, we get browser router and router wrapping our app component. So this is why we import browser router as router. Number one, it saves us a little bit of typing here. But number two, you'll see that our app component is actually wrapped with router rather than browser router. And so it just helps us to visualize that here with this. So it matches this up with what we actually have in our code. Okay, now let's take a look at router, and it gives us some pretty interesting things here, which we're going to use through the next few videos that we'll be watching. So router, this router component gives us this history object, some children, which is our app component here, on props, and then on our state, this match object. So let's take a look at this match object. This match object is referring to everything that's up here inside our URL. Remember, we're learning about React Router so that we can display different pages depending on what our URL looks like. So this match object is going to be really important to us later. Right now, params is empty. Our path is / and our URL is /. So what this means is after our base URL right here, localhost 3000, we have our URL and our path. Now let's take a look at this history object. This one is really interesting. So React Router, since the browser is no longer handling routing and doesn't have to refresh every time we route between views, etc., etc., React Router, the React Router library is going to basically hijack the functionality of the browser as far as routing goes. So the browser routes with a similar history object. In fact, if we pull up our console, type window.history, we see this interesting object and we type in window.history. We see this interesting object here. And let's look at the prototype of the history object. So on the prototype, we've got a function called back, one called forward, go. We've got this length thing here, push state, replace state, etc., etc. So now let's look at the router history object. You'll notice we have go, go back, go forward, length, location, push, replace. So very similar functions between both React Router's history object and the window history object. That's because React Router is going to do a lot of the same things as the browser history object. So a couple things to note here, and we just want to look at these now so that we know that they're here for when we need them in future videos. And there we go. We have set up React Router in our Avenger app, and we'll continue to build out our Avenger app over the course of the next couple days.